It's $10 billion. That's an unprecedented increase. Still not enough.
When that was created, the first thing Peter Piot said was that UNAIDS is an advocacy agency, pure and simple.
And this was my first objective when I came into this job, and that was put it on the political agenda.
He divested himself of all of the program aspects and the scientific aspects of AIDS.
This is not a scientific issue. This is a matter of politics.
Except one unit. He kept sort of the numbers unit.
We are really doing a major disservice to say it is not as bad as it looks like, because actually it is much worse.
1 month after my interview with Dr. Piot, the Indian government slashed their estimates by nearly 60%. Shortly thereafter, UNAIDS acknowledged they'd been overestimating global HIV statistics for more than a decade.
They've painted themselves into a corner, and now their house of numbers is falling apart.
America is leading the fight against disease, and I call on you to double our initial commitment to fighting HIV/AIDS by approving an additional $30 billion over the next 5 years.
Global corruption, misuse of statistics, in order to convince people that there's one hell of a problem out there, guys, and we've got to go and do something about it.
If you look at the real world, you know, how many people are infected, diagnosed to be infected, and eligible for treatment? There are very few compared to the number.
In April of 2008, Congress approved a $50 billion expenditure for AIDS treatment and prevention.
The vast majority of the world's population is not at any measurable risk of HIV infection.
No measurable risk. Growing up in the age of AIDS, I was taught there were 3 certainties in life: death, taxes, and contracting HIV from unprotected sex.
If you don't use a condom, there's a lot of chances that you can actually get the killer disease that is AIDS.
I did a study of the heterosexual transmission of HIV in California, and we recruited individuals who were infected with HIV. Then we recruited their sexual partners, and we looked at whether transmission, in fact, had occurred.
Padian runs a study. It's a 10-year study with the world's most virulent, terrifying sexually I mean, this thing jumps, off of penises into vaginas miles away. How many of them do you think, after 10 years, with the world's most terrifying, virulent, sexually transmitted disease, came up positive? Nobody. Nobody. Nobody who was negative came up positive. 0.
I think HIV is more difficult to transmit than probably most other sexually transmitted diseases. I mean, I think that's pretty widely known.
If I were to have unprotected sex with somebody who is HIV positive, how many acts would I have to engage in before I got the virus?
Just one. I think 1 would be enough.
First act?
1 is enough.
Remarkably, HIV is a difficult infection to transmit.
This contradicts everything I was ever taught about the sexual transmission of HIV.
AIDS is the best example of what's really scary and alarming and dangerous about our culture right now, which is that it's a culture of PR. It's a public relations phenomenon. The truth doesn't matter. What matters is the image. If we were talking about reality, the reality is that AIDS is over.
Somebody decided in the early 80s that there's this infection called HIV. And upon deciding that, I don't think it was debated enough.
In 1983, Dr. Luc Montagnier and his team of researchers identified what they thought might be the cause of AIDS.
I really was excited because we knew it was a new type of virus, not shown before in men, and very likely to be the cause of AIDS. Of course, at that time we didn't have the full proof what's the cause of AIDS.
That initial work was rapidly reinforced by additional virology and serology studies in Bob Gallo's lab in Washington.
Gallo got pushed by the Reagan administration that wanted to do something on AIDS finally. They literally told us to just close CDC's lab down. We don't care about it. There's a bunch of gays, who gives a shit? I mean, that was really their whole story. So the whole thing that they rested their political response was, well, we discovered the virus.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The probable cause of AIDS has been found.
Credit must go to our eminent Dr. Robert Gallo, who directed the research that produced this discovery.
What was new that day is for the first time we were saying, that's the cause, I'm sure.
It was a silly press conference. There was not evidence then that HIV was the cause of AIDS. It wasn't called HIV. There was certainly evidence that he didn't discover it. It was discovered in France.
The conference was held before any of Robert Gallo's papers were published, therefore before any other scientist had a chance to review them and look at the evidence and see if he got it right or wrong.
Gallo's philosophy was to have people to whom he would give the virus be in his own control, so that any information that came out of that would come through him, so that he got all the information. Indeed, often put his name on publications and would, quote, collaborate with them. But should you have any broader view other than his personal glory and your personal glory, this was not a scientific pursuit in any way.
The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services decided from now on, we are only going to fund AIDS research that assumes that Robert Gallo's virus is the cause.
I didn't think that HIV in 1984 was the cause of AIDS. That's why I did the study comparing gay men with Kaposi's and gay men with pneumocystis. I assumed there must be something else. If you go read my paper from 1985 that Kern and Jaffe would not sign on to, I actually lay out the cofactor hypothesis in that paper.
I'm a promoter of the role of cofactors in AIDS.
Well, cofactors just says that the cause of a disease is by more than one factor.
Just simply being infected with HIV is not going to do it. You need certain cofactors.
Cofactors are not necessary.
Dr. Fauci will say HIV causes AIDS without the need for anything else. That's kind of ridiculous.
The data that indicate that any different type of infection like mycoplasma or something like that is a necessary cofactor, I believe those theories have been debunked.
What the fuck does he mean? Sorry. What's it? What does he mean that there are no cofactors? Where's he coming from? There's cofactors for everything.
Cofactor implies something specific. And it really gets us off into tracks that are wandering.
Gallo isn't gonna change his mind, but he's probably 70 years plus now. He's gonna remember things that we all remember, things that are good for us. And we forget the bad things. The cofactors are important to really understand how people get ill, why they get ill.
What is asked of an AIDS journalist is to deny an existing reality, which is a strong, growing body of dissent on a scientific question.
In August of '92, my dad had just read his latest National Review, and there was an article in there about Peter Duesberg, a maverick cell biologist. He said he didn't think HIV caused AIDS.
To deny that this well-identified, well-characterized virus is linked with AIDS is, to my mind, just potty.
He said, I can't replicate this in my office. I can't get this virus to do anything. We thought, oh my gosh, my dad is really daydreaming. He's trying to wish this all away because he knows how upset we are. Just wish it all away, and everybody will be gone happy.
If Fauci would say, here's $1 billion for alternative theories of AIDS, you wouldn't believe what's going to happen. A lot of HIV researchers overnight would start cofactors. The first year they would call them cofactors of HIV. And the next year, the coal would be topped and HIV would be topped a year later.
Peter is highly intelligent. He did excellent work. I mean,